Hello and welcome to these Sentinel LDK videos. I am Maxime Brissot. I work as sales engineer in the EMEA region in the software monetization team, part of the Thales DIS CPL group. This video will be a focus on software license concurrency, and we will see the notion of network license and cloud license. Let's see first the different type of key deployment. With EMS, we have seen previously that you can build some key directly, and then depending on the scenario of deployment of your customers, you can have different ways of deploying those keys. This first deployment scenario will be what we call a standalone license. On that scenario, you build a key on the EMS, and for each user using your application, you distribute a key that will allow local enforcement. You can also build on EMS a license to control concurrency. You will define that license on EMS, distribute that license on a network license server, and once installed, that license will allow all users from the network who has possibility to connect to that license to consume a seat of that license with a limit of concurrency. For example, if that first user connected disconnect from the license, it will give the room for fourth users to connect, always with a limit of 3 concurrent users. Another way of deploying a centralized license is to make a cloud license. In that case, a little bit similar to the network license, you will build on EMS a network key with concurrency limit. You will deploy that key not on a network server, but on a cloud server, and then to allow given users to connect to your applications, always with the control of concurrency, you will need also to define on your cloud server an ID string and distribute that ID string directly to your end users to allow their own authentication to your cloud license. All right, now that we have seen the concept of concurrency, let's see how to configure this concurrency. So the concurrency is actually configured on EMS and is defined per feature. When you define the license terms for a given feature, you will be selecting the type of license, perpetual, based on time or number of executions, but you'll also have possibility to define a concurrency and introduce the concurrency number of instances you will be willing to include in your key and the way you want to count it. Okay, so the accessibility to that license will give you possibility to manage 2 kinds of concurrency. It can be a local concurrency if you do not activate the network capability of your license, and then in that case it will be smart to count per number of logins or number of process. If you are activating the network capabilities of your license, you will be able to count concurrency by login, process, or even stations. Let's now see how to configure the ID strings. So the ID strings, they are actually, as you understood, they are configured on the cloud license manager directly on the runtime engine on the ACC. Those ID strings are allowing you, ISV, to only manage the concurrency and delegate the management of the ID strings constructions to the admin of the cloud license manager. So if you are the one administrating your cloud license manager, you will be the one creating ID strings. But if you install the cloud license keys on one of your customers' cloud license manager, there will be an admin of that cloud license manager at your customer side who will be creating such ID strings. Those ID strings allow you to have a better security in that way that if you are managing your cloud license manager, you will be the one managing the presence of the key and the activation of the key. So no risk of duplication of the key on some exotic virtual environments. You're the one to manage the key existence and then no way to duplicate the key. Also, it enhances the end user experience as the users, they don't need to activate their license, so exchanging their fingerprints. They can directly connect to the license key by providing their ID string. Now that we have seen the possibility for an end user to connect to a remote license server, being a network license server or a cloud license server, we'll also see the possibility for end users to detach a license seat from a remote license server. So what is a detachable license? It's basically the concept of a user normally connected to a remote license server who has the need to disconnect for some time of that license server, will not have access, and then has a need to continue working with a key. So that user has a possibility to request the detach. In my example, I have 3 seats originally, and that user is willing to be autonomous for 10 days. And then he will be able to request a local key valid for 10 days, allowing him to work in full autonomy. And then remaining on the license server, we will reduce the number of concurrency from 3 to 2. After those 10 days, the key will be destroyed locally on the user side. The number of concurrency will be reestablished to the original value, meaning 3. And that third seat will be able for anybody from the company to consume, or if it's a cloud license, using an ID string. Now that we have seen those concepts of concurrency, we'll do a demo. So in the demo agenda, I will show you the creation and deployment of a cloud entitlement on a cloud server. We will create some ID strings, and then we will see the remote consumption with concurrency of such a cloud license, and we will see also the detach. And then we will review together the cloud server, the admin control center configurations. All right, so this is our demo environment. So let me show you the different screens. So we will have in this screen the EMS, where we will produce the entitlements. And then on the right, I have actually 2 screens, 2 license managers. So one ACC, which will be the cloud license server. As you can see, it's on a public IP. And actually, it's a cloud server that I installed on the Raspberry Pi. So that cloud server already contains 2 keys. Actually, those keys are empty. And I have then another screen, which is the other ACC, which is a user ACC that currently contains nothing and is connected to nothing, no key and no connection to any cloud license manager. So what we will do, we will produce an entitlement on EMS, and we will make that entitlement automatically pushed to the cloud license manager to make the key, and then we'll define the ID string on the cloud license manager, and then use that ID string from the client to connect to the server. All right, so let's get started. So we will first, as we can see, we still have our demo product, and actually we will make an entitlement with our demo product. So how to do this? So we will simply make an entitlement. So we make a new entitlement for, we can say it's for a new customer. So customer 2, in my case. But I will create that customer 2. Don't need to enter all the details. And on that customer, I'm going to produce a new product key, it's a software license. All right. And for that customer, I'm going to include the demo product. So that demo product was the product with my 3 features, and I need now to configure my features. So I'm lazy, so I'm going to select the 3 features at the same time and configure all the same at the same time. Remember, you can make a configuration of feature by feature. And here in my demo, I will put an execution count with 10 execution. So here is where I'm going to configure my concurrency. I will decide to have a concurrency. I will be willing to make a cloud license that will serve 2 instances, and for my demo, I'm not going to count burst stations. That would be the case if it will be a real cloud license, but actually for my demo and to show you concurrency, I will count not by stations, neither by process, but by login, and I will do multiple logins from the same toolbox. As you can see, it needs to be a network license. I want to produce a cloud license, so it needs to be accessible remotely. So once I have configured all my different license terms for my features, normally for, I would say, a regular software license, I will need to produce a product key, and activate my license by providing my fingerprint and all those activation steps. In the case of a cloud license, my cloud license manager is already configured to receive directly cloud licenses from my EMS. So I can only press produce and push, which will have the effect to directly activate my license and push my license directly on my cloud servers. If now I go on my cloud license manager, I can see a third key that has been created. If I look at its content, it contains my demo product with the features 30, 31, 32, with a limit of concurrency of 2, counting by login, with 10 execution each. Okay, so now that I've produced my cloud license on my license server, I will need to build some identities. I'm going now to go on the configuration side of my cloud license manager, and then I will go on the client identity tab, where I will be able to create some client identities. So let me open the screen a little bit more wider, right? And I will add another identity. So here I'm going to create an identity for my client 2. As you can see, that identity has already some properties to allow, of course, the remote login access and to allow the remote detach. We will limit that identity to the key we just produced, and we will have a specific parameter to configure the number of machines where we will allow the user to configure that identity, meaning that a user can configure that identity on multiple machines and use your software at different moments. Of course, not at the same time. You will only be able to consume one seat behind one identity. So we are going to save that identity, to copy it, and then we'll distribute that identity on the client side. Okay, and now we'll see how to configure that identity on the client side. We will go on the configuration, access to remote license manager, simply copy the identity there. I'm going to save. And if I go back to my Sentinel keys now, I will be able to see a remote cloud key there that we will see have the 3 features that I've prepared on my cloud license manager. So if now I try to consume those features, I'm going to make a login from the toolbox, and then I'm going to execute a first login that you will see will produce one login, one session. If I look, so that's what I'm seeing from the client side. If I go on the server side, I will see the same, of course, to have on my key, my products and the features, I will see one session against feature 30 and only 9 remaining executions. If I now go up to the limit of the concurrency, because we have set a concurrency limited to 2 logins, okay, so I'm going to make another login, second one, that we will see here and here. And then I will go up to the limit of the concurrency and try to make a third login that will be refused, telling me that I have too many users. So as you can see, we have set up a cloud license with concurrency limit, and I'm able to consume the license remotely using my identity. I didn't have to configure my fingerprint from my client machine. Everything has been set up automatically between EMS and the cloud license manager. I just had to configure the identity on the client side to be able to access the remote features. We are now going to see the detach. So in order to show you the detach, I need to update my cloud license, because the cloud license that I have is based on executions, and we cannot make detachable license for execution license terms. So I'm going to take the last entitlement that I built. I'm going to copy it and just select my features, configure them again to change the terms into, let's say, well, we're going to make perpetual licenses. I'm going to keep the concurrency that I had to 2 and counting per login, and I will allow, of course, the detaching for those features. I'm going to save those properties of feature and directly make a produce and push completed, which will have the effect to update my cloud license, as you can see directly, into perpetual licenses. All right, now that I have updated my license, which is normally detachable, I will go on my client side, and from the list of the products available, I will see my demo product with the detachable ability. I will see that I have possibility to detach it 2 times, and I will see the possible actions to detach, which I'm going to click now. So I'm going to request a detach. I'm going to enlarge that. All right. And the way you can request a detach, remember I have set up a maximum duration for the detach from the server. And here I can ask, for example, an expiration date. So we are on the 27th of September, and I can, for example, request a detach until the 30th, okay, as a date. And yeah, I can put a comment to work locally, right? Detach and attach. Okay, so now it's done. So if I now connect locally on my ACC, I can still see my cloud license, and I also can see a local key that is produced that will have my demo product and some features which will end at the end date of the key itself, which is September 30th, and to allow a local concurrency of 1. So now that we have detached a local key, a local license, we can connect to it locally. So if I open my toolbox by doing a local login, okay, a default login, and against, for example, the feature 30, I will launch it, and I will see that I'm establishing a session with my local key. And if, for example, I would be trying to connect remotely, so not locally but remotely, so I'm using a login with a scope template to connect only remotely, then if I launch that login, I will establish a session against the remote cloud license. If I look at here, for example, on my Sentinel key, I will see that on my product that I have 1 detached, that I have available 0, because I already have a remote session plus detached. So if I look at my features there, I have a concurrency limited to 2 logins. I have already 1 login and 1 detached, so all the seats are occupied. And if, for example, I effectively want to launch a second login remotely, I will have the error message that I have too many users connected. Okay. Imagine now that as a user, I'm willing to extend my duration. So I initially set up a detach up to the 30th of September, and I'm willing to extend my detach. I can still go on my product, and then from there, connecting to the cloud license to extend that detach. So I could, for example, here modify the date, which is no more going to be the 30th of September, but could be the 4th of October. More time. And by doing so, it's going to update locally my key that you will see, my local key. If I now look at the features are no more going to expire the 30th of September, but the 4th of October. Imagine now that I'm the 2nd of October as a user and I back on my company or back connected to my cloud license. I don't need the local license anymore, so I will be able to go on my local license products, and then from the product locally to be able to cancel the license locally. And by doing so, it's going to produce locally the deletion of my key. And then if I connect on the cloud license, I will now see from my product that I have my 2 sessions available and none being detached. We'll now see how to configure the ACC to make it become a cloud server. So I'm going to concentrate on my cloud server and go on the configuration tab. on the configuration tab, I will see the name of the machine being LDK Cloud, and I will give remote access to the ACC using HTTP. Okay, same thing for the admin APIs. If you keep the remote access to ACC disabled, it means that you will be able to connect for the configuration using a local host and not being able to check the configuration, neither access the ACC page remotely. So you could, for the demo, I'm using HTTP, but in real production, you would use HTTPS. If you're using remote access, you will need to define a password. So I already entered the password to connect to my ACC, so I didn't have to enter it. But normally you should set a password to allow remote access for HTTP and HTTPS. So basically on the basic settings, that's all you need to configure. And then you will need to go on the access from remote client tab, where you'll have different choice to select the way your users can remotely connect to your license server. You can have no access if it's just a local license manager. Or in my case, if it's a cloud license, I will only accept customers presenting an identity string. You could have some mix of configurations where the cloud license would require an identity, but the non-cloud license would be accessible by all clients. Or if it's, for example, a network server with no need of identity, you would select that last option. The public address for the access with identity and ACC is actually the public IP, or the domain name, could be ldkcloud also, .com. It is the public name that your customers will use to connect to your cloud license manager. So that IP is going to end the identity string. The trusted IP address is the IP address of your EMS server. In order to use the produce and push functionality of EMS, you need to establish a trusted link between your EMS and the cloud license manager. And here is where you enter the trusted IP address of your EMS server. And on the detachable license tab, you will see the possibility to detach a license. That's something that we have enabled, that we have configured for maximum duration of 21 days. And you could have also another parameter to allow the automatic detach of a license, meaning that every time customer would do a remote login, that remote login would automatically detach seat. And here in my example, that would be a detach for a maximum duration of 2 hours. Okay, after 2 hours, if the user is still logged in, it will continue for an extra 2 hours, but if the user is no more connected, the seat will be returned automatically. In the command detach settings, you can reserve some license, some seats actually on your network license. So for example, here I could say among the 2 seats that are available on my product, I could say that I want always to have 1 seat available for online connection, or if I have a big number of seats, a percentage of the total of seats. In my demo, I didn't use any reservation on my cloud. I was able to detach everything I wanted. And you could also have a specific configuration. Here I only have 1 product where I could say that product, I'm going to reserve 1 seat on the server, or a percentage of 20% anyway. And I could have also a max detach duration that I could configure per product. And for example, I could configure something different than the general settings to position, for example, here 60 days. All right? Okay. Coming back to the configuration, on the network side, nothing specific except that you need, of course, to have network visibility to allow all network adapters to give access to your license manager. All right. So that's basically all the configuration you need to do on your license manager on the server side. And if we resume quickly what was required on the client side, the only thing we needed to configure on the client side was to access the remote license manager by providing here the identity string that we have generated for that user. On the EMS side, if we go on the administration console, if we go on the license configuration tab, we will see that we have activated the cloud licensing for all products. And if you go on the general configuration, you will find the public IP of your cloud license manager that you need to define on your EMS in order, again, to set up and to allow the produce and push functionality between EMS and your cloud license manager. That's all for the EMS configuration. So with those 3 elements of the EMS, cloud license manager, and what you need to do on the client side, you have seen all configurations needed to have your cloud licenses working. We are now done for the demo. So let's see what are the next videos. We just saw the notion of software license concurrency and also how to build the network license and cloud licenses. And the next video will be a video regarding envelope to see the benefits of IP protection for your software. Thank you and bye-bye.